I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? Okay, so I wanted to have this conversation because my daughter brought this up to me today because I don't, like, I'm not, if I put on the TV, it's Netflix or something like that to binge out.
Yeah.
But I did see like little clips of, my children showed me the little clips of Sexy Red, who is a rapper, hip hop artist, entertainer person, doing a song for the elections, Make America Sexy Again, because she's called Sexy Red.
Okay.
And then I heard that Megan Thee Stallion did something during DNC or something that Kamala was at. Megan Thee Stallion came and performed.
I remember hearing about it. I think it was a rally or something, but yeah, I remember about it.
So you have these two. So let's just talk about like the whole ecosystem and dynamics of what's happening in the elections. We know that the Black female vote in the election is really significant, right? Like those are the folks who go out and vote. We've seen that. We know that the white female vote is also extremely significant when it comes to voting in our elections, both local and our federal elections.
Right.
Okay. When you see the antics of all of the things that are going on in the world, and then you hear that someone like Sexy Red, and to all the Sexy Red fans out there, hey, okay, cool. And then you hear that Megan Thee Stallion is, performing where Kamala is, and that is a match that I would have never imagined in my head ever at all, because of the way that Kamala presents and has presented throughout the history of her public service. But then I'm like, if the Black female vote is significant and you're thinking about the population of Black female voters, I'm really curious as to the Sexy Reds and the Megan Thee Stallions of it all, the demographic within the voting population that they are attracting. And I say that because it's an intergenerational conversation between myself and my 23, 24-year-old daughter who did go to vote. And we were talking about the whole purposeless of voting. And she's talking to a person, and I'm like, well, is that person going to vote? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, you can't be dating or talking to nobody who's not going to vote. You just, like, that's not what we do in our family. You just, no, that's not what you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, if you need to have a conversation with that person and have them go to their whole family and work out voting, because we want to, it's a lesser of two evils that we are dealing with in this moment. And I'm not specifically talking about human individuals. I'm talking about platforms and ideologies and what's happening in the world. This is nothing personal about Kamala or Tim or Donald and whoever else that other person, I don't even know. But this is about how we are engaging the masses to come out and vote, and what it does to our election system, and like kind of the global gaze when the representation, one of the largest voter demographics, comes from entertainers. In particular, an entertainer like Sexy Red, who is going to do Makes America Sexy Again, with like all of the references to Make America Great Again. And the way that she presents in her sexual freedom is really raw and really raunchy and really outside of the kind of very serious things that we need to be thinking about as a nation going into this election. And I was curious as to, I don't know if you know Sexy Red. I imagine you might know a little bit more about um, Megan the Stallion. But if you've seen Sexy Red, I would be curious to know when white people see these things and it's like amplified on TV that this is the focus of Black American voter demographic and population, what actually would be running through your minds and or the conversations that are happening? Really curious about that.
Hmm, that's a good one. I do know about Megan Thee Stallion. I'm not familiar with Sexy Red, so but I can only glean from your description what may have been the atmosphere and the presentation in that moment. I do remember hearing some chatter about Megan Thee Stallion being at that rally and um just some, both sides of kind of conversation about why and was Harris pandering to a specific demographic? She's trying to make herself look cool, that kind of dialogue. Not really knowing, not seeing the performances or knowing all of the context, my first instinct is to think that it is not, it's a white lensed decision about who to pull in to that atmosphere to speak to the demographic that they want to bring in. Um, and when I see
Mm,
things like that, I get concerned that it's feeding into narratives that are not, that are going to be palatable and that are going to feed that cognitive dissonance that whiteness has about who Black people are. And I always don't want, want to stay away from that. When I see um, that level of what's the word I'm looking for? Um, acceptance, I guess, or furthering of a narrative that whiteness already has about Black people being, especially Black women, being loose and sexually free and all of these things. That to me feeds whiteness tropes. And so I would be nervous about that. Now, I don't mean to suggest that Black women like Megan Thee Stallion and Sexy Red and all cannot, they're free within their power to present however they want to present. It's not about really how they move through the world. It's about who made that decision and what was their intention behind it, either knowingly or unknowingly, and how does it speak to whiteness? And I'm always worried about that. Not that centering whiteness shouldn't be the thing that people think about, but I think people make those kinds of decisions with the white audience that they're trying to talk to. I mean, it was a manipulation. I feel like it was an intentional decision based on we not only do we want to speak to a specific demographic of the Black population, but we also don't mind
mm,
the tropes that whiteness tends to already think about this particular demographic of Black identified folks. And so to me it feels a little icky on both sides, I guess. I don't know what else we would expect from politicians, because we know that they are in that season of, I mean, they're always in that season, but especially right now with, less than 90 days before the election, they are, ramping it up in terms of the demographics that they're talking to and who they're trying to pull in, trying to make her look cool because she doesn't typically present as cool. Maybe that might be a fair thing to say. She has her own problems. And then the other dialogue that I know has been happening is the um, I guess disconnect is a good phrase. And I don't know if you've heard about this, and we don't have to switch gears in this, but I'm just curious about your thoughts about the divide and conquer dialogue that's happening between the Black population and people that are pro-Palestinian in the Arab or Palestinian communities. That's a hot topic right now. And so those are my first thoughts.
yeah. Um, Yeah, that's really interesting. You bring up a very interesting component that I hadn't thought about because I was just thinking about like attracting a young urban population of folks that would be listening to, Megan Thee Stallion and Sexy Red, period, right?
Yep.
And also recognizing that they're Black women. So it also is a commentary on the Black female vote, which is really strong. But
Mhm.
you just gave me some clarity about also choosing those people does feed into the narratives and the tropes that white folks have about Black women. And so it does fit within the political game to
Mhm.
have chosen those women. And that's some real deep manipulation.
That's
Whoa.
some deep shit.
So
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm having a moment of whoa, that I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. Uh, and then when in regards to the divide and conquer, what are you referring to, like
So,
specifically?
yeah, so there's and I may not, this is, relaying it through my white lens, but what I'm hearing is that there is a divide and conquer campaign happening between the Black community and the Arab community, specifically pro-Palestinian community, because Kamala represents the administration that is still supporting and funding and arming Israel in its genocide of Palestinians, especially right now, because yesterday the Democratic National Convention began in Chicago. And so there's a lot of dialogue around everybody needs to rally behind Kamala because Trump is, the devil. And from what I'm hearing, there is a fair amount of discord between the Black community and the Palestinian slash Arab community, where Black community and I know I'm painting with a broad brush, so it's certainly not everyone, but a lot of members of the Black community, especially those of the influencer class, entertainment class, um, want Kamala to ascend as the first Black biracial South Asian president, female president. And the accusation from the pro-Palestinian side is she supports a genocide. So how can you vote for this person? And the greater dialogue is, does the liberation struggle for Black people, is it separate than the liberation struggle for other marginalized groups, specifically in this case, the Palestinian people? And so there's a lot, and then the greater dialogue that's happening outside of that is this just a divide and conquer tactic? So if the trolls and the, the people that stir the pot and underneath it all are trying to pit these two sides against each other, then that splits everything, which is gets them to their end goal of getting Trump back in office. So there are people in the Black community that are saying, don't fall for it, don't fall for the okie doke, don't fall for the divide and conquer. Palestinian liberation is directly connected to all liberation, and especially Black liberation. And then there are the others that are saying, if you can't, if you're going to support this person who was okay with funding a genocide and arming a genocide, I can't speak to you. There's this just, and so I'm trying as a white person, my daughter, my young person who's 26 called me the other day and she said, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. And she said, and she's been listening because there've been a couple of times where she's called me with all kinds of opinions. And I'm like, sit your white ass down. You do not need to have an opinion.
Listening,
You
listening to us or listening to
No, just
world,
listening to the ethers
to
out there.
what's
It
happening?
has
Yeah,
the
the
opinion
chatter.
about,
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, you can have your opinion, but you need to keep your
yeah.
white shut, this is not your lane. I have said that to her so many times in the past, like couple of years. And then she calls
Yeah.
me today and she's like, I wonder what you think about this. I'm thinking that I just need to be quiet because it's not my lane. I'm like, oh, somebody's been
Uh,
listening. I appreciate, because
hmm.
yes, I have my opinions, but you know, I need to shut the hell up. It's not my, I belong to neither one of these groups. So I don't know if that gave you context, maybe that you hadn't heard before, but
No,
that's,
yeah, that does give me context. That gives me some clarity. When I hear this, my first thought is that this is contextually not coming from the pro-Palestinian or Black community.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's my first thought, because we've for people that have been aware of what's been happening in Palestine, for liberation workers, freedom workers, activists, and all that, this is not a new conversation or struggle at all. Like, we've been knowing that this has been happening, and we've been in support of it for a very long time. And anybody in the pro-Palestinian movement, of people doing movement work, would know that. So that's not going to be a conversation that actually happens between the people who have been standing against this oppression for generations.
Right.
This definitely sounds more like a white narrative
Mm-hmm.
that is being communicated, because white narratives love oppression, Olympics, and trauma bonding, and porn, and all that stuff is exciting in some way, shape, or form. And we live in a culture that we're attracted to that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
All of us are attracted to that in some type of way. I am curious about, within this narrative, and this is why I would kind of extract where it's coming from. Within this narrative, and within the context of our political system, what is the alternative?
Yeah.
Are we then voting for Trump? Also, who is going to be in support of Israel? Like, what are we talking about? Are you saying to not vote? That's what I'm saying. Like, if we get a little bit deeper into the narrative, I'm curious about what the solution is that looks different than what the solution is on a larger spectrum of what we have in our political system is Kamala and Donald.
Mm-hmm.
We have an idea of what it's going to look like with Kamala that we can work through. We do not have we have an idea of what Project 2025. Project 2025 is moving forward regardless of Donald or Kamala. So I think that we all need to be clear about that, because that's more about people in positions in government, in local politics,
Right.
in our police force, at our schools,
Right.
and they've already started pushing that forward. So anybody who's unclear about that and thinks it's about waiting for the vote, I'm going to say it's not. Project 2025 is the blueprint. It's happening. It's just the latest blueprint of mass general oppression of people.
Right.
That being said, we can work maybe with Kamala, because we know what that's going to look like. And with Donald, we don't know what that's going to look like, right? Because there's all these games that are being played. He's distancing himself from, Project 2025 in the public sphere, but then, like, there's all these private little conversations coming out that's saying that money is going to him, and they all talking about what it's going to look like when he gets into office and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So contextually, anytime these narratives that are creating confusion, and we also know who has the power of the pen, and we also know who has the power of voice in the US, that's where we have to look at it. If you go deep into these communities, you might be able to find one or two people who are having that conversation, but the larger understanding is that a majority of people who are non-white and white folks are recognizing what the level of oppression is, and recognizing what the white backlash looks like, and are recognizing what the promulgation of, like, the white nation, again, like, resurging that, what the effort is for trying to get that back in order, trying to make it sexy again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there is Dr. Jill Stein, just named Professor Dr. Butch Ware as her running mate, and I'm just getting to know who he is, and saw an amazing interview between the two of them on Instagram Live the other day. And but the reality of whether or not a third party candidate could possibly rise up and be able to make inroads there is definitely a long shot. So yeah, I mean, I hear you. I
We're
still
able to do it. Sorry.
no, what were you gonna say?
I mean, we're able to do it if we had the monetary capacity to um and maybe it's not even monetary, but if we had like the really strong organizing capacity to mobilize a huge demographic of people to not vote for Kamala and or Donald, and to just vote for somebody else that people really um, could trust in that position. I think that it's possible. I do. It's just that we're not conditioned that way. We're conditioned into the narratives that are given and where the money is. And like my phone goes off every 10 minutes with, you know,
Fundraising.
information from
Yeah,
both sides of
right.
the tracks about raising money and what they're going to do and all of that kind of stuff. And that's what we are being filled with. And
Right.
so that's what our mind is going to go to the ballots thinking about. We don't
I
even get time to hear about Jill Stein. We don't get enough information about any of the other, and I can't even name all of them because I don't even know, because the only thing I hear about is Kamala and Donald,
yeah.
honestly. I'd have to like go and do a deep dive, which I'm not doing just yet, till it
Yeah,
all calms
I've
down.
said I've said for years that if a third party was actually going to have any impact, there needs to be a foundation built at state and local levels that third party folks get into positions of power at the state and local level, and getting us conditioned to understand that there can be a third party and that there can be alternatives. You know, we are very conditioned to think that it's just the two and that's all we've got. The caveat to that that I feel like maybe a little different right now versus how it's been in the past is the uncommitted vote. Um, the uncommitted vote had a bigger impact, I think, than anybody really expected it to have in during the primaries. Um, and I know that there are uncommitted delegates at the DNC right now, and I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. And that's been in the few things that I've watched of Dr. Jill Stein's messaging. That's one of the things that she's been talking a lot about, is how in other countries that it is possible if we rise up. I mean, if the numbers of people that did not vote in 2020 just came and voted for Jill Stein and
Someone
voted
else.
for you, it would be a lot. We do have the numbers to affect that level of change if that's what we want. And I feel like um in this season, we are seeing, just by function of Biden, stepping down off the ticket because of the pressure and because of the donors. I mean, I know it's driven by money, and the donors were saying, "Hey, dude, we're not going to give you money," and so therefore he stepped down. I'm not fooling myself on that. It wasn't just about, but the donors were. I think the donors shifted gears because of the pressure that the electorate put on. I think that had something to do with it. So we do have more power, I think, in this than we think we do, and that's by design. So anybody listening to the sound of my voice, if you've kind of resolved yourself to the fact to think that you have no power in this, I would encourage you to maybe, it ain't over until it's over, even though, the game is stacked against real change, but you just never know. And the pressure that we're putting on the Harris Waltz ticket right now, I think, plays a role in how they change and shift and morph. And so we can't just resign ourselves.
Right.
So, I mean, we could, but that hasn't gotten us anywhere in the past. And so if we do want to see this change, this season shift, we have to see that kind of imagine that shift in our own hearts, and
Mhm.
try to be, visually adventurous about how it could end up looking if something shifted or something happened differently than what it's happened in the past. And, you know, we have to reimagine. My license plate says reimagine, because that's what I'm always trying to remind myself and others that, you know, if we can't, we've lost our imagination. That's one of the things that our indoctrination is destroyed, is our imagination for change and how something could look different. So I'm so grateful to all of the teachers that have taught me how to have a more critical thinking eye about all things political system. And to your first point about messaging and about who they're inviting to speak and who they're, I look at that, it's such a different lens
Yeah.
now than I ever did. It's like, so who's writing the checks, who's paying the bills, and what narrative are they trying to push? And those are my first three gates, you know, when I see anything. And I was mentioning earlier today, and this is a whole nother topic, but was mentioning earlier today about the fervor around the DNC that just started yesterday in Chicago. And I'm likening it to how I felt back when Obama first became the nominee, and the excitement around that I felt in my core. I'm seeing that same level of excitement in the folks that are swirling around the DNC, oblivious to the fact that a genocide is happening. And somebody unfurled a stop the genocide banner at the DNC last night while Joe was speaking, Joe Biden, and the vitriol that came from the audience members that were right around the people. Somebody tried to snatch the banner out of their hands, and it's supposed to be big tent people, you know, and you can't even handle having a banner that says, okay, Joe, whatever, but you're still funding a genocide. Is, you know, they're oblivious. They want to say fascism is coming, fascism is coming. Fascism already exists, and
It's here.
they're propagating it. So I would have never seen that, and nothing's changed. It's all the same game. So
It
anyway.
is. Yeah. Yeah. So in my community of the people, knowing kind of like the history of Kamala, there's not the same level of excitement as being introduced to, you know, President Obama back in that time frame, right? And because it was like a completely new concept of a Black person being able to have opportunity to be in this office. Um, I, I'm confident that Kamala being in the presidency would do a good job. Like she would be able to hold it down, hold the office down. The level of excitement though is not strong. One, because of genocide, two, because of the way that our world is continuing to spiral under her watch with Joe Biden. Um, yeah, and it would be refreshing, in my opinion. It would be glorious, in my opinion, to be able to do what they did in France or
Oh,
Bangladesh, just shift, to like just come out of nowhere and shift everything. The one thing I'm curious about though is when the votes go in, and we've seen this being a person from Florida, is that they can say the count is whatever it is because we don't have the level of transparency that we want.
sure.
And that's the only contention that, you know, they like their systems to stay exactly the way that they have been.
Right. Yeah, the systems definitely are built to serve the power class. And the folks that are already in power, not the folks that are not necessarily wanting power, but wanting balance and
Yeah.
equity. Yeah, it's we don't have those systems in place yet. But I am encouraged by the continued frustration and fervor and volume around how the systems are not built to serve anyone that is not of that ruling class. And that's the way change can happen, is by us keeping our foot on that pedal and keeping the acceleration going and not letting up, not letting them sleep, not letting them relax. we just have to, I don't know what the outcome may be, but we know that it could be different than what we've been
Yeah.
seeing.
But one of the groups that I'm with have a thought process going into this election of block, broaden, and build. So
Mhm.
blocking all of the negativity, broadening the scope of voter population, and building a unified front so that we can really have the shift that we need to have.
Block, broaden, and build. I love that.
Pretty
Thank
fire.
you.
It's pretty fire.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard?
continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck
Why do
is
I
produced in
give a
collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.
Why do I